Michael.
Okay, we're on. All right, we're going to call to order this work session of the Larimer County Board of Commissioners. Today is Monday, August 12th, 2019. This is the weekly community development work session. I'm Tom Donnelly, chairman of the board, joined by John Cafalis, commissioner from District 1, Steve Johnson, commissioner from District 2, and Lori Cadridge, our interim director of community planning, infrastructure, and resources. Is that right?
That's correct.
Is here. Welcome.
You
Director.
say that better than I do.
Wow.
Thank you.
Just say sippers. I don't know what it means.
Look at this. So what do we got? What are we working on today?
Well, I've got a couple of quick updates before the team gets going on theirs. And the first thing that I have is a bit of good news.
Oh,
I was just
Really?
notified.
you rarely have good news.
Nobody ever comes to tell us the good
You
news.
rarely.
Do it. I'm sorry. Apparently, I had the mic the opposite way. So I have a bit of good news for you today. We were notified this morning that our Coalition for the Waste Shed program won an award for the resource recovery group, and will be receiving the award later this month in New Orleans. So
Resource recovery. What is that?
it's
what is
the
this now?
it's the outstanding community or government program, and it's through the National Recycling Association, and it's under the category resource recovery. And the conference is in New Orleans. Fort Collins is planning on attending, and absent anyone from Larimer County, they'll receive the award for us and bring it back.
We're not letting them do that. Now, what did we get the award for?
For just bringing together the coalition and the whole program.
Okay. Is this the Malcolm Baldrige Waste Shed Award?
It is not, sir.
Oh, what was it called again? I thought you said Malcolm Baldrige.
No. Outstanding community or government program, and it's through the recycling. It's because of the efforts of waste.
World-class community. Wow.
diversion.
Okay, good.
Well, that's good news.
I'd be happy to go to New Orleans.
It's August 26th through 28th, so if you do want to go, we got to make arrangements quickly.
Accepting on behalf of Mayor Troxel
Yes.
is Larimer County Commissioner Steve Johnson. There you go.
No, I don't know. That's pretty soon. I don't know.
Okay.
It was soon.
Congratulations to our staff.
Yeah, that
Yes,
is really
their
good.
good
thank
That
you.
is
It's
good.
awesome. It's great work on part of the region,
Steven
right?
going?
He doesn't know yet.
Okay.
We just got
I mean, he should go.
notice from the conference. Either he or someone from the staff.
Do we know who made the nomination?
Yes, it was Susie Gordon from Fort Collins, but Stephen worked with her on it.
Nice.
They did it together. Yes.
Good.
Wow.
Well, we thank her for her work as well.
Okay. And then a note on the town of Timnath IGA. We were planning on hearing that today. However, due to one of their staff members having an illness last week, we weren't able to coordinate. So we've tentatively scheduled that 2 weeks out, and we'll just want to make sure we're able to meet with them before we come back to you. Also on Friday, we met with Northern regarding the NISP application, and we led several requests for additional information before we continue our review with them. In response to going through each item we requested, they gave us an estimated timeline that it would take them 2 to 3 weeks to respond to the information request. So when I look at the weeks, doing the math, 3 weeks out from today, what I shared with them is I thought it would be very difficult to have another meeting in September 23rd if we were not getting the information back until just a couple of weeks prior to that. And so I just wanted to give the board a heads up that that September meeting might move until November. We'll try to keep the rest of the schedule in place, but there may be a delay in the September meeting. As well, Leslie has some follow-up regarding a presentation to the Planning Commission today.
So what now?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
You caught me off guard because my announcements were at the end. Sorry about that. So Leslie Ellis, Community Development Director. So she's, Lori's referring to the update at the work session this evening. So since your board has already heard several times now updates on the Northern MOU and the letter and the process, we wanted to make sure that Planning Commission was also up to date on that process and understood what's coming. And so at the work session tonight, we have some time built in to mainly bring the Planning Commission up to speed. It could also be an opportunity if you wanted to talk to Planning Commission about, like Commissioner Johnson, you brought up the,
You mean Wednesday night?
I'm sorry, Wednesday
Yes.
night. Yes.
This is not on my
Yes, sorry to confuse everybody. So Wednesday the 14th, yes, at the work session.
It could also be an opportunity if you wanted to talk about process items such as whether or not you have a joint hearing at the end with Planning Commission, or if there's some alternatives to that. Commissioner Johnson, you mentioned that as something we may want to look at again, or any other process-related items. So just wanted you to be aware that, some of this will be a little bit redundant for you, but Planning Commission hasn't heard it, and it would be a chance for you to talk with them a little bit if there's some process items that you think would be helpful.
Do you guys want to do it at a joint hearing with them? This is the 1041.
It's just an update on the proposal.
Yes, just on the process, really.
On the process.
Northern will not be there to do its presentation that you heard some weeks ago when you had your session. So it's really just about the schedule and the process and how we work together, and any ways of engaging with the community around this issue.
Ultimately, the public hearing that we will hold on 1041 IGA. Is that something you guys want to hold as a joint meeting? I don't think that's a good idea, but if you two think that's a better way to go, then I don't need to bring it up again. Or do you guys have an opinion on it, or do you want to discuss it with the Planning Commission?
And
I would like to have more opportunity to think about what is the best way forward, and to have the appropriate discussions with the appropriate participants.
One of the ideas that Leslie shared with me this morning would be as if the board wanted to move forward with the joint meeting, and through hearing from your constituents, you heard a need to do something different. You could always schedule another hearing with the board following that. The pros and cons, at least as we discussed, is if people are going to turn out for both meetings, it would be more convenient for them to attend one meeting. The con would be if, as Commissioner Johnson mentioned, right, if there was information provided to the Planning Commission that would shape the IGA going to the Board of County Commissioners, then people would have a chance to do that and see the result of it and comment on the result rather than make the same comments.
It seems to me that I think Commissioner Johnson made this comment when we had our work session with the Northern Board, that there is some logic to allowing for the public to have an opportunity to speak prior to when we have a draft IGA that's been already gone through the process. So I need to go back to the amendment to the MOU, and I assume that the time frames, the dates that are listed on there might be some adjustment, but for the most part, we're following that. So I just want to put that out there, that I think, well, you can imagine, I just want to make sure there are opportunities for folks to, have public comment and not wait until we are in a hearing to decide about the IGA.
right, and that would be what was the September meeting that will now be a November meeting. Potentially, that would be the opportunity for the public to comment on a preliminary draft before it goes to a hearing.
And if I may on that, Lori, it must be already somewhere that material that you've given us, the list of items that you've asked Northern to get more information on. Where is that information? Do we have that? We must have that. Was that brought up at our work session? Or is that some new stuff, I guess? You had a meeting with them on Friday.
We did. So, Commissioner, what would happen is, based on their submittal information to our agencies for review, then the engineering team, the planning team, right, got together and provided very specific information that might be needed related to stormwater or related to access, so that's the type of comments. We're happy to get that to you, and we expect that we'll have different information by the time it's ready for the board.
Sounds like that's more of a technical nature.
That's correct.
Think about. Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the surprise, Leslie. So, commissioners, if there's no more discussion on that, then we're ready for Matt on the Magpie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Man,
You didn't surprise me.
look at all that money. Look at all that money.
All that money. As we talked about here in the last
Look at
couple
all
of
those
meetings,
jobs.
COGCC, the state adopted 181. As a result of 181, there's some new criteria that the director of the state needs to approve applications by. Magpie, which is the applicant on the wells that are proposed right here on the map, which are up on Kaufman Pit, as well as these wells, which are down south of 402, and these wells, which are across County Road 16 next to Warburg Farms. This is Chapman Reservoir right here. And then one small well over here. These are their applications that are currently in Larimer County. When 181 was adopted, if your permits had not been approved by the state, then you were subject to the new 181, whatever it was going to be. And that's still a moving target, and a lot of things are shifting and shaking. But the applicants are allowed to ask the COGCC to let them move forward with some of their applications that are closer to being approved or not. So these applications right here, we're going to call those Bunker 8 applications. I'm going to zoom in on them a little bit. Sorry, I won't wait. Are just south of 402. 402 being right here. And then this is County Road 16 right here. This is County Road 7 going north. And this is 9E coming down south to 402.
Yep.
So they're sitting out here. This is the Coors property right here that they sit next to. You guys approved a conservation development on that property not 2 years ago. 5-lot development, and the rest of the property was put into a perpetual restriction from development. And so that property basically consists of this 160 acres that sits here. I don't know why my mouse is acting all weird. So these pits are on the adjacent property. There's 10 of them all together, so there will be 10 holes drilled on one site. And they will run east and west with their horizontal drilling to capture stuff in that area. So the application for the surface improvements was submitted last year in October. And went through the process with the state, and we were allowed public comment on that. But we didn't have any comments at the time. This was before everything was all stirred up. The permits, the 10 permits for the holes were submitted in December of last year, and were ready. Most everything was ready to go up around April when the new Senate Bill 181 was adopted. But because it wasn't issued and finalized, those permits got logged under this new system. And so Magpie came in and asked Leslie and I if we would talk to you guys about allowing those to step forward and seek approval for those permits through the state, because they were basically ready to get approved.
And the state will use the Senate Bill 181 criteria when they evaluate those
They use
permits?
the director's criteria on those. There is only one house. The closest house is over a half mile away. That's Coors property.
What about the fact that this particular well pad is located adjacent to that property where there's a conservation easement? Isn't that a concern? Or would
It's
that?
not a conservation easement.
Concern was homes.
It's a conservation development. And the conservation development just precludes any future development on that property in perpetuity. And so that's probably a good thing, because nobody's gonna come in and develop on the adjacent property anytime soon.
So you're asking us to allow this to go forward because the surface rights applications were put in back in December, but ultimately the final decisions will be made by the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Is that correct?
Underneath the director's objective.
The 16 review criteria?
It's outlined by Senate Bill 181.
And if they determine that this does not meet those criteria, then they would inform the company Magpie, and they'd have to see what the next steps are, I guess.
The only thing that I've heard concerns about with Magpie operating, several people have brought it to our attention. Magpie has had some violations on some of their other pits. Where those are at and what those violations are, I'm unaware of. But they've been,
Pits, why is it a pit?
the COGCC
pads.
is actually looking at them as part of their criteria. And they'll look at that as they go through this permitting process. if they have any other concerns with their operating procedures, they would certainly clear that up.
So is it just that one in the center there that you were pointing to, or is it all four or
It's
five
just
of them?
this one right here.
Okay.
Those are called bunker 8.
Yeah.
This is bunker 3 here.
They sent us a letter
This is
about this.
copper.
They sent us a letter about this. This is
Yes.
owned by them by Surface. They're the Surface owner as well, or something.
They own the majority.
There was some kind of interesting thing about the property.
And what are the red dots
Existing
Those
wells.
are all existing wells.
Existing
that are out
wells.
there in the county.
that have been drilled in the past?
Yeah, and
Okay.
when you look at these, Commissioner Johnson, they're individual wells. So these are those old vertical wells that you see out there that are pumping up and down. And so whenever you do a vertical, you do a horizontal drill, you got to look at your spacing unit. And the spacing unit is where you're going to actually be draining the fluids from. You actually have to go through and close a lot of those old wells down, or show that you can't impact them because they're in another
Strata.
oil structure.
Okay. Okay.
And just so that you can see that this is Larimer County right over here. This is the
Like a
Kaufman
well.
pit. That's the one that raised a lot of controversy just southeast of Larimer. These are the 8 permit, the 3 permit south of this is called 2. And the only other 2 active permits in Larimer County are this permit, which is over direct. This is that.
Is that the Wizard one? Is that the one that's close?
Withdrawn.
That one got withdrawn?
It was withdrawn. That was up by Wellington. In the floodplain, it was withdrawn. The Wizard pits were. The other pits were approved that you're thinking of. That were right in this proximity right here. This pit right here is right across from Martin Marietta's site along the railroad tracks. And this site is actually within Johnstown. The rest of these sites, these here are on the other side.
Well County.
So we only had 4 active surface applications in place right now, which
I know the people that own that property.
Well,
North of the
40
railroad.
holes.
One of my veterinary professors lived at that railroad in County Line Road.
That was just to give you a little bit of perspective of what's going on. So as the LGD, we were requested whether or not we would want to allow those permits to move forward. After looking at this and the spacing and everything that's going on, the setbacks and whatnot, I can't see that there's any reason why we want to hold them up as a county. We wouldn't have holding them up before.
yeah.
If the board is so inclined, I'll call the COGCC.
And we don't have any additional criteria other than what's in Senate Bill 181 that we would apply or use at this point in time.
There's no significant water
Do we?
body
Okay.
sources right in the area. They're following the state's standards as far as monitoring local wells in the area and doing all those requirements that they have to do. So they have to meet the body of state regulations, which is fairly substantial.
And just so I fully understand the pros and cons of our decision. So if we were to, quote, hold up this permit application for further scrutiny, what does that mean? Because we don't have any regulations as the local government designee, what does that actually mean? We'd have to have some valid reasons for doing that, and you've just suggested that you think they're okay with.
We would have to come up with some reasoning as to why we shouldn't support that, which could be that we're in the process of developing regulations.
What does that mean for the company? That means
That means
They're on
have to
hold, or
wait
they-
Until either, the COGCC would have to look at this and say, we're gonna make them wait or not. Again, the COGCC, the state is currently looking at over 6,000 permits. This is in the mix of those 6,000 permits. And all the company gets to do is every month, the state asks every company out there, which well permits do you want to push forward? And if we have the time to get them approved, we'll approve them. If not, they're gonna wait until the next month or so.
I see.
And Magpie said on their program of study, this is the next set of permits that they would like to have issued. They don't have any ambition of pushing any of the other permits at this point. And it would probably be like
And thank you, Matt. And this is one well pad that has perhaps 10 wells,
10 holes.
10 holes, which means they'll drill 10 holes and then they'll go horizontal.
I think those wells come in about 7,000.
Wow. It's amazing to me.
That's a deep hole.
Any comments? Any advice?
I agree with your recommendation, Matt.
As do I.
I wish we had our regulations in place. Fine. Some reservations.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Matt. We have another update for you with on the subject of marijuana, and Frank and Michael are here for that.
Assistant County Attorney Frank Haug, I think you had asked Commissioner about the marijuana delivery and the marijuana cafes. And the way the statutes for both of those are written, they have to, you have to affirmatively approve them before they can happen. So the default is they're not allowed. If the board affirmatively takes action to approve it, there also could do a referendum and basically take it through the voters. And if the voters affirmatively approve it, then they can start doing an application process. But the default is they're not allowed.
And we don't have any regulations or criteria on cafe or delivery, do we?
No.
So if somebody made an application, what would we do?
Well, they can't. It's not valid until you guys decide you want to take applications.
Okay, great.
They set up a state process to regulate it, but until the local jurisdiction says we want it, you have to take a step to do that affirmatively. Otherwise, it's not allowed.
And Frank, is it correct that in the county, or Michael, there are only two vendors that are able to sell recreational marijuana?
Correct. And I'm Michael Whitley with the Larimer County Planning staff. So to dovetail on what Frank said, so to be eligible for, and the Larimer County would have to proactively approve regulations to allow for delivery. And the only entities that are eligible would be those that have licenses for either a retail store or a medical marijuana dispensary store. And right now, what we have is two non-conforming medical marijuana dispensaries. So we have two entities that were approved through special review to allow them to sell medical marijuana, and that was before state licensing came into effect. Then after those two entities received approval, well, actually before they received approval, we enacted a ban. So there's no opportunities for additional medical marijuana stores or cultivations or what have you. Then when state licensing came into effect, we allowed the two entities that had the medical marijuana special reviews the opportunity to apply for the only two retail marijuana stores. So that is Choice Organics on Smithfield Drive behind American Furniture Warehouse and Flower Power Botanicals on Duff Drive, so north of Mulberry off of Link Lane. Those are the only two entities that have licenses, and those would be the only two entities that would have the ability to apply for licenses to deliver marijuana. Now, I've been in contact with both of these entities recently, not specifically about delivery, but they know what's going on at the state level, and neither of them has expressed interest in applying for a delivery license or asked what Larimer County is going to be doing for delivery. I could reach out proactively to them if you'd like me to, but so far they haven't contacted me.
Michael, do we know if the city of Fort Collins or the dispensaries that are located within the city of Fort Collins, if there are any plans, or is the city looking at allowing this to happen with those that are located within the city limits?
I'm not aware of what the city is actually doing, but that makes a good point. So to allow for delivery, the entity, so the jurisdiction where the marijuana is to be delivered also has to allow for delivery. And it only allows for delivery to residential properties. So if these entities were to want to deliver to the city limits of Fort Collins, the city of Fort Collins would actually have to proactively allow delivery.
Or vice versa.
or vice versa, right? Same thing with Loveland, Johnstown, Windsor. I doubt if any entity other than the city of Fort Collins would even contemplate it, given that there's no other jurisdiction currently that allows the growth or sale of retail marijuana or medical marijuana at the commercial level.
So if the city proactively approved home delivery of retail marijuana, recreational, then that can only be delivered within the jurisdiction. Did I get that right? No, I got that wrong.
So
jurisdiction of
the
the-
licensed facility, wherever that license is held, has to allow it, and then the delivery location also has to allow it. So
Oh, I see.
if we allowed delivery, but the city of Fort Collins said, no, we're not going to allow delivery, then delivery would be allowed to properties within unincorporated Larimer County by those two licensed entities, but they wouldn't be allowed to deliver within the city of Fort Collins unless the city of Fort Collins said, yes, we will allow delivery. So there are multiple jurisdictions involved.
And if the city of Fort Collins allowed for home delivery, but the county did not allow for home delivery, then it worked the opposite, right?
Correct.
Or Loveland didn't, or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay, I think I got it.
Right. Okay. Interesting times.
Is there home delivery of alcohol?
Oh yeah.
Liquor stores?
Oh yeah.
Is there?
Hell yeah.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
You can call up and they'll bring it to you?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Howg knows. He's got it on number 5 in his
didn't know
speed dial.
that.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll come up to my house.
So
Oh, I see the little car driving around all
Michael,
the time.
is that correct, or is
Right,
that,
Lafferty?
is the chair pulling my leg here?
I'm not aware of the
You being
regulations regarding delivery of alcohol.
You can't man.
I know they have it in Denver. I don't know if they have
Yeah,
it here, but-
I see a little car driving around Loveland like that's like a delivery.
Like the ice cream wagon, is a little
Yeah.
bell go off and
Yeah.
might go through the neighborhood.
Good thing, so people aren't.
Yeah.
All the wine
Kids
goes
come
around.
out. Yeah.
Well, your kids do, but
I'm pretty sure
I
they
did
have it
not
in
know
Loveland.
that. I did not know that. Huh.
I did not know that either.
I can find out what the
Nobody's
rules are
going to
about
pay
that.
for that though. 'Cause it'd be so much expense on top of the
1 hour
What is
alcohol delivery Fort Collins.
one
It's
hour.
called. There's an app, Drizzly, alcohol delivery.
Are you serious?
There's an app for that.
Of course there would be an app.
It's the
Would
Foster
you like us to
Plus
move on?
I seen this little. there's a little car
I
that
have
drives around
never
Loveland.
seen that.
Disrupting.
I've
so
never seen
let's
that.
move on.
Thompson Valley Liquor, I think they do. House of Spirits, they do. Okay.
Wow. How about that?
I'm surprised you haven't taken advantage of it. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm too cheap. I'm not paying delivery.
So
fee.
we're
That's probably
assuming the
doubles
board
cost.
does not want us to pursue any kind of delivery option
I don't think
in the
unless we
county.
hear from somebody, why would we want to spend the staff time developing regulations unless somebody expressed an interest in it? That
Right.
might be my view.
Then the last thing we have is Leslie with any further updates.
Yep,
Oh,
and just a
again.
few quick things.
That's usually bad
So you have a
news.
short agenda today, 5 consent items. We're not expecting,
Are.
yeah. We are doing the land use code kickoff this week. That's the other item that's on your work session. So be thinking about how you want it to be more user-friendly and predictable and efficient,
It's a
you
land
know.
use what?
Land use
The
code.
code.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Since you finished the comp plan,
Yeah.
they're
Oh,
gonna go
okay.
with the
That's
code.
the
Yeah.
self-licking
How long
ice
does it
cream
take you to
cone.
develop the new code?
The gift that
Well,
never
Matt
keeps
can
on
talk a
giving.
little bit about the process, but it'll take a year and a half, basically, through the end of next year. We've got a bunch of people
Lafferty Full
doing
Employment Act.
interviews.
Stimulus package. Job creation package.
So our consultants are working with a bunch of stakeholders to
Same
hear from
consultant
them.
that did the comp plan?
Different consultant now.
What?
So
Jeremy
they
New code.
Jeremy didn't get it.
yeah.
New code.
That's too bad.
I don't know.
So
Who's doing it then? Who's the consultant?
the company's called Clarion Associates. They do this kind of work around the state and around the country, and
Lawyers and less streamers.
Well, so is there a belief on your part that you'll be finished by the end of 2020?
we are going to do everything we can to be finished by the end of 2020. That's the goal. Now, they anticipate probably having some other work beyond the end of next year if there's some specialty areas that we need to carve off just because they're going to take more intensive community engagement or what have you. They'll set those aside and come back to those in 2021. But the goal is to get the bulk of the work that deals with how we administer the code, how we do our processes, cleaning up zoning districts, those kinds of things would all happen between now and the end of the year so that you'd have something you could adopt by then. And you'll hear a lot more on Wednesday, but we just wanted you to be thinking about it before Wednesday.
So one specialty area might be Estes Park.
Well, and
We don't
that's,
know what's gonna happen with the code up
Yep.
there.
and we are actually looking at that as a separate parallel
Yeah,
process to be ready for next year. Yeah.
keeps getting.
Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to plant the seed for Wednesday. There's more to come on that, a lot more.
And the intent, of course, is to reflect the conclusions of the update of the comprehensive plan.
That's right. Yeah. The idea is to have a code that aligns with outcomes of the plan, but that also addresses some of the items that have stacked up over the years as needs of things that need to be just cleaned up or made more user friendly or what have you.
It's a big day.
I think some of the other things that we're looking for it to do is to modernize the code. It's been, a lot of the uses and things that have been put in our code are from the 1960s and 70s. We want to do that. We would like to make sure that our processes are the most efficient and effective for the people that are using our system and make sure that the public is well heard on those things as well. So we're going to be looking at process and procedure as well as how the code is actually written and try to make this a user-friendly document.
John, you have a question?
Go ahead, John.
What are you guys always talking about over there?
Not about you.
Talking about Estes Park.
We're talking about Estes Park.
So hopefully we come out with a product
Sorry.
that moves us forward.
Okay. On the topic of Estes Park, since you're on that, we do have that questionnaire online that's been open since you had the public meeting a couple weeks ago. It closes tonight, so if anybody's got a final thing they want to add, we'll summarize all of that and make that available for everybody who's been looking for the outcomes of that meeting and what's been online. And then we'll move toward the next steps of summarizing that and presenting some options
Do you know how
around
many
that.
people have submitted comments at this point? Do you know?
We've gotten a fairly good stack of just comment forms, and I haven't looked real recently to see how many people, but I think it was in the 40 to 50 range online, but probably more by now because it's been about a week or so since I looked at it.
Probably from 4 or 5 people.
Did we hand out comment cards at the meeting? Is that how
Yeah.
they got them? Okay.
Yep.
Do you have to have what do you have to have from one per email address or what?
Well, per IP address. So, it's not a survey because it's
Oh, I
not
see.
statistics. It's a question
Yeah.
form. So, for somebody who has 5 different devices, they could take it 5 times if they were so inclined.
They
but
do.
Do it at work and do it at home.
Oh, they all do that, right?
but otherwise,
A sweepstakes.
I get the anonymous emails, hate mails.
I don't.
I know, I do.
but that's why we take it as feedback. We don't try to statistically,
right.
summarize it.
It's not.
We look for themes as opposed to quantities of comments and that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's closing, and then we'll move toward the next steps of, you mentioned, we've got some work to do probably in terms of how we would amend sections of their code or pull sections of their code into our code if we're starting to review in the Valley. And so there's some work to do there too. And then we're just gearing up for the wireless work session next week, so you'll get a packet of information in a couple of days around that too. So I know you're all really excited about that.
Yeah, we are.
Do you think that will be do you think there will be more than just that work session, or will it depend at the end of that work session if another one wants to be scheduled, or
Yeah, I think it'll depend
folks want more?
on you. We'll ask that question at the end. If you feel like your questions have been satisfied and that we've got a good working draft to move forward, and we may have some things we want to add or amend based on the comments, but otherwise our goal is to try to go to a hearing in September if you think it's ready to go. If you think it's not ready to go, we'll take what time we need to do whatever needs to be done, but otherwise our goal is to hopefully move forward.
What will happen at that work session? Taking
So-
inputs from the panelists that we invited.
So Frank and I are the primary staff team who will present where we are in terms of having updated some of the materials. Our consultant Ken Fellman will be there to help set the help you understand the parameters and the framework of the legal environment and statutory environment and that sort of thing. Then we can take any questions that you have. We've also gone through a lot of the public comments we received and tried to develop some options in the areas where there's clear, there's some legality to doing something within the regulations related to the various topics that have come up. And I think you'll find that, Frank too, but also our consultant Ken Fellman can help advise as to whether something starts to go into a gray area where we could be challenged, or where we're on solid ground in terms of some of those topics. But we're really focused around the land use regulations related to wireless facilities. I think there have been a lot of other comments that have come in that kind of skirt the edges of that or might be outside of that. And so we want to make sure we kind of stay in that realm of land use regulations related to those facilities.
And will you talk about or do any presentations of what other communities have done with their land use regulations? Is that part of the plan?
We weren't necessarily planning to present that next week, but if you have particular questions or ones that you'd like us to look into, I do have a list. We have been looking at other jurisdictions and what they're doing with not only their regulations and how they operate them, but also some of the issues that they've taken on. Some of those communities have kind of ventured into the gray areas a little bit. We can talk about that at the
I don't know
work
if you guys
session
are
if you'd
interested in
like.
that. I would be, but if you're not, I can just talk one-on-one with Leslie and Frank. But I think that would be of interest, what other communities have done.
We can certainly put some stuff about that. The other part that's helpful is Mr. Fellman's worked with a bunch of other communities. So I mean, he's we're not the only people he's helping do this for. It's a bunch of other people also.
Yeah, so I think come armed with lots of questions, and he will, I think, be able to help navigate through those. And if we can't answer them that night, we can follow up with responses or do a little bit more research if we need to.
Who was the gentleman that came and talked to us about the small cell facilities and developing a MOU with how we?
Remember Matt?
Do you remember who that was?
I don't remember his name, but he was an industry worker, so he was with Crown Castle,
Yeah.
and represented them.
Not
And
this gentleman, though.
Yeah.
no,
This is a different person.
that he was directly from the industry and was just sharing 5G technology with us.
I mean, it was interesting. It was helpful.
Yeah.
It was different.
We
Okay.
certainly miss Drew Davis for a lot of reasons, but also because he was such a so knowledgeable about this particular topic.
Okay.
All right.
So that's next week.
Good.
Great.
That's all we have for you.
Fun. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Anything else? Board's adjourned.